Today we're going to address the second two themes. So theme 3, science brokers for transitioning to a climate resilient and circular society. And I'm really messing up my presentation, sorry for that. So this is the schedule of today. So in the morning we have 2 keynote speakers and discussion and poster pitches before coffee. Then we have the parallel sessions that you can choose your wishes. And then after lunch, we have theme 4, nature-based solutions for land and water management in urban and industrial areas, with 2 keynote speakers and a discussion and poster pitches. And again, then we have the 4 different parallel sessions that you can choose from. And at the end of the day, we have the poster session with some refreshments. So, and after that, we will go to the, for those who have registered for that, we go for the conference dinner, which is on about half an hour walking distance from here. And we go all together there, but I will explain that later on. So now we will start with the first session on the keynotes on theme 3. And Margot here, she's going to be the chair of that. So please.
Well, thank you, Saskia. As said, yesterday we already had a great day with very nice keynote speakers and also very nice discussions. So I hope we can continue this line today. We've been able to find some very interesting speakers for you from the Netherlands and from Brussels, from the DG Agri. And we will have some information about the Delta program in the Netherlands, everything we're trying to do to keep our feet dry and also work on nature and so on. And also we will see how nature can help us to keep our feet dry and bring back biodiversity. And at the same and later on, we'll also discuss how the agricultural system can support water safety and also mitigation for climate change. So first I'd like to ask Lilian van den Aarsen from the Delta Program Commissioner staff. She will tell, she knows everything about the Delta Program. She's been working formerly also for Room for the River when she still was working at the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. And actually she also has some roots in agriculture, so she's a very knowledgeable speaker. And Lilian, welcome to you.
Thank you very much, Margot, and it's really an honor to be here. I also have roots in ecology because I studied biology, so but let me try and keep it to the Delta program and the climate adaptation. We are. I'd like to focus first on what the Delta program is, how it came about, and what their aims are. And secondly, I try to interweave the lessons that we have picked up during the last 10 years. Of course, you can imagine the Netherlands as a delta has a lot of history in water management. Well, it's very well known, but it's also very well known that we have a history in flooding and looking for ways to protect our land from water, both from the sea and from the rivers. The flood in 1953 was very devastating. In 1992 and 93 we had real problems in the river areas with high waters. Then we came up with new concepts as Room for the River in order to cope with, safeguarding our country against flooding. It's still an ongoing business. As you know, at the last summer we had 21, we had a great excess of water in the eastern part of the Netherlands in the summer. We were prepared, but still there was a lot of damage. And in our neighboring countries, there were also people who died. Our delta is continuously under pressure, and we have a lot of challenges still to face. It's not only about flooding, it's also about sea level rising, more extreme weather, hotter weather, more drought, more or less river water, salt intrusion, soil subsidence. In a very densely populated country as the Netherlands, you can imagine we have to be smart. And in 2008, the government came up with the suggestion to start a second Delta program. Now, the first Delta program built the Delta works in the southwestern part in order to keep the sea out. In the second Delta program, we have institutionalized a Delta law, a Delta commissioner, a Delta fund, and we are obliged to make a yearly report on the progress on measures, plans on climate adaptation. And in a nutshell, the aim is for the long term, we are a long-term program to keep the Netherlands a good and safe and livable country with 3 goals. It's not only safety against flooding. Increasingly, our attention has to focus on freshwater supply and guaranteeing our big IJsselmeer content of sweet freshwater. Droughts are very often occurring earlier, more extreme, and the spatial adaptation challenge, which is not only in city, but in cities you can also see the devastating effects of flash floods, of heat stress, of drought. So it's not only safety, water safety, but also freshwater supply and spatial adaptation. In the long-term perspective, trying to come up with plans and measures in the short term in order to meet these challenges ahead and, well, have our future generations a safe future. I think two important lessons from the start: institutionalization of the Delta program and the Delta Commissioner, the Delta law and the Delta funding, very important. And also the rhythm of yearly progress reports to the government are driving factors for our plans and strategies. And from the start, this is, and in the Netherlands, that's quite specific, a national program. It is not only the government on the national level, but all tiers of government are involved, both on the regional level, provinces and water authorities, and on the council level, the municipalities. And we, as I said, we have 3 goals, and we base our plans, our measure, on the best available scientific knowledge. That's also a very important success factor. And we try. Well, climate adaptation affects everybody, and we try to work together with all the governments, with the knowledge institutes, with businesses and NGOs. We are thinking on how to reach the civilian population, the ordinary civilians in the Netherlands. That's still kind of a challenge, because in the Netherlands, everybody thinks, well, we have so much work on dikes and room for the river, we're safe. I think the droughts and the heat stress and the flash floods are making people aware that not everything is guaranteed and that we still have to work to do it for the future. As I said, it's very important to have a joint accepted scientific basis. And we look at the IPCC reports, and of course there has been a recent 2 reports that are very important on sea level rise and on climate change. We try to incorporate these new insights and re-evaluate our strategies, our plans, and our scientific basis. The Royal Dutch Meteorological Institute, KNMI, also plays a very important role, but also other scientific and knowledge institutes. The Delta program was set up as a regional implementation program. We have 3 general programs and plans, flood protection, freshwater and spatial adaptation, but these general plans are elaborated on made concrete in the different regions of the Delta program, and they vary from the coastal area, the Wadden Sea, the river area, IJsselmeergebied, the Southwest Delta, and I always forget one, the higher sandy soils in the eastern part. And what we do each year is try to get further in decision making on adaptive strategies and choosing measures, adaptive measures that can address the problems that we see coming. It is uncertain what exactly will happen in the future. This week there was a report from the TU Delft that said, well, at least we can show now that our sea level rise is higher than we expected and we counted upon, but we try to devise strategies that are clear in the objective in the long term, but adaptable, flexible in the implementation from now on. And we try to make adaptation pathways that are sustainable for a certain period, but can also give rise to system switches or different pathways when it is necessary, when the strategy will not suffice anymore. It's very important in the governmental setting that you link the short-term actions to the long-term water challenges. And not only the strategies and the plans, we try to keep options open and only decide what to do when it's really necessary, when we don't have, we can't go on anymore like the usual way. But also in our measures, we try to find measures that are robust, that a bit flexible, and especially building with nature offers a lot of opportunities to add a little or subtract a little in a robust design. Spatial reservations are also an important measure. Room for the river, room for climate change in the future is very important. But as you can imagine, in our country where we have a housing problem, where we have agriculture that needs the land, it's a very difficult measure also. And this was, we try to support and enhance and encourage the use of building with nature in the different regional programs. And these are a few examples. Soft, where you can be, hard solutions where you need to be, infrastructure versus ecosystem functioning. So we try to cater all possible conditions. Also, an important part of our learning curve since 2010 is learning by doing. Spatial adaptation at first was a kind of the runt of the litter of the Delta program. It was a program that took its time in the developing, and we found out that a stimulus in financial support made a lot of gave rise to a lot of regional and local solutions to the heat stress, the water floods, and the droughts in the different areas. And we try to learn from these bottom-up experiences and try to, also a very important learning effect is that it's very important to also give attention to knowledge, sharing of knowledge and learning from each other. So we every month all the regional programs come together and exchange experiences, failures, but also things that work very well. If there are no questions on the Delta program, I would like to focus now on the lessons that we are still learning. And I think a very important one is that it's very difficult, but it's very important to keep the long term in perspective, to always think, what does it mean? What does this proposal, this plan, this strategy contribute to our long-term problems? And do we not be aware of lock-in and changing courses? Also, adaptation, I think for the Netherlands is very clear. We spoke about it. Adaptation is a must, but it's complementary to my mitigation. We have to start adapting now. And on the regional level, especially, a lot of governmental plans and policies come together. And there we have to integrate climate adaptation plans into, for example, agricultural development, which is very hot topic at the moment, but also nature development and housing, because the Netherlands, well, we want to build 1 million houses for our own people in the next 10 years. As I said before, one of the factors of our, well, what we call our success is the institutionalization of the Delta Law, the Delta Commissioner, and the Delta Fund, because while the government is changing once every 4 years, and in the Netherlands sometimes often, we want to have a continuously a focus on climate adaptation, and we don't want to be, I think that's a very conscious choice in the Netherlands, don't have to be dependent on changing governmental insights every 4 years. We also learned that creating a community is a very powerful instrument in making people and tiers of government work together towards a joint goal. And we put a lot of effort in keeping connected with our regional programs, with our regional governments. We have an annual conference, we have a newsletter, we invite people to come and talk about their measures. I think we try to support them when they having difficulties in devising new strategies. And the last thing I would like to talk about is that we started as a Delta program with a specific mandate on water safety, freshwater supply and spatial adaptation, and we came to the conclusion that just keeping our own solo path will not get us what we want. We have to build a bridge toward the other transitions that are important in the Netherlands. I already talked about housing. Well, the Delta Commissioner last year has issued 2 advices on how to take water challenges and on the long term into account when choosing locations for housing and when deciding on how to build houses. The same thing is ongoing for the national program on the rural areas with a specific emphasis on biodiversity. And yeah, this is one of my important mottos. A small government is prepared for the future. We are trying as good as we can to make visible what our future could be, both on the climate dimension, on the socio-economic dimension. We use scenarios and we work together with the National Environmental Assessment Agency, with different, with other knowledge institutes to devise Delta scenarios in order to try and pinpoint the corners of the possible futures, and so that we can look at what would be the worst case, can we be prepared, what are tipping points where we should well, be prepared to have a change of strategy. And we try to develop methods and instruments and models in order to make these predictions and the translations to measures as robust as possible. Okay, there's a new aspect is the government recently finally, I think, agreed on the principle of water and soil as a base for economic development and spatial planning. Because in the Netherlands, we are reaching the limits of what our ecosystem can handle, and we are facing, maybe very disastrous effect of keeping the water and soil, in a very damaging way. And at the moment, all the parties involved with the Delta program, all the national governments are trying to make this agreement concrete. What does it mean? And I already, especially in the very challenging transitions, agriculture, housing, we have to be prepared. We advise, we focus on putting water and soil at the front of the policy making, at the front of decision making, in order to come up with no regrets. The last, this is a last lesson we are learning. The high discharge in last summer in a part of the Netherlands where we never had that much water in the summer. It came about because the rivers, but also the tributaries, the smaller brooks, showed a high discharge, and there was a rainfall that kept on falling on the same place. It's also investigated that this kind of extreme weather can happen any moment at any place in the Netherlands, and we are not prepared, not yet prepared as possible. So we are looking at ways to cope with unprecedented, unpredictable, more extreme weather conditions. And I think it emphasizes two things. On the regional level, we have to work together both on the main system and the regional system. And it is very clear that water doesn't stop at the borders. Everybody knew that, but we are national. We also have to develop an international dimension, including crisis management. Last, a smart government is prepared for her future. As I said, the sea level rise in the Netherlands is detected that it's faster than we expected, than we thought about. We have, together with the ministry, we are working on a knowledge program, sea level rise, and we developed together with our Knowledge Institute 4 possible responses to a sea level rise that may be higher than 2 meters beyond 2100. And these are methods making scenarios visible, trying to devise and look at what measures can be taken where, what are the consequences, what does that mean for our water safety, but also for the socio-economic aspect. That is one of the ways that we try and keep up with the longer term development. And with this, I would like to conclude, I hope it's not too long, the lessons that we try to share from the Delta program.
Well, thank you very much, Lilian. So a very impressive presentation with a lot of lessons we can take by heart. But I would like to give the opportunity for one explanatory question. If somebody has an urgent question to Lilian. Saskia?
Yeah. Well, congratulations. I think it's a very interesting presentation. One of the questions I had, I already saw it on your last slide with scenarios. To which extent is a tactical retreat to the north an option? So I won't ask that question, but I was just wondering, because I really like your the conclusion that soil and water are the basic for spatial planning, and you mentioned 3 transitions, so houses, energy, and biodiversity. How do these transitions relate to the also an ambition of a Sustainable Development Goal 15.3 for no net degradation or no ceiling? And is that also part of your, well, scenario development?
Yes, because one of the important values, it was on one slide, one of the important basic values of the Delta program is aiming for sustainability. So trying to incorporate the sustainable development goals in all our work. And especially for these transitions, and for example, agriculture and biodiversity, which have a very close relation with water and soil system, we think that it's very important that the opportunities that water policies can give to, well, for example, enhancing biodiversity, making a more silt agriculture possible, but also the conditions that the water and soil system demands from agricultural use and land use. We think it's very important, and we even wrote an unasked advice about that from the start of planning processes with regard to the use of the water and soil system, you should to take into account what can this system handle, how can we not only safeguard it but also heal it in some ways, like for example the PT areas. What is needed as a starting point from where you can devise what is possible in this land use and whatnot. We try to work closely together with the ministry. That is the driving factor there. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The next speaker I'd like to invite is Nicola Di Virgilio. He's from DG Agri and Rural, and he's also a member of the National Research Council in Italy. He is very well experienced in climate mitigation and adaptation by agriculture, and he's going to tell us more about what's happening in Brussels and how agriculture can become, well, our mate in combating climate change.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and also very happy to be here, and thank the Commission. Always a pleasure to see what projects and exchange with. I work in the unit on environmental sustainability in DG Agriculture and Rural Development. So this is the unit that try to steer and to see how the common agriculture policy can help the agricultural sector to for a transition which is more climate friendly and also for all environmental aspect. My idea today is to give you an overview of what is happening in Europe in terms of policies which are linked with the land sectors, and of course everything which and also related with climate and also environment in a way. Everything started with the Green Deal, I would say, a few years ago, where the Commission vision on mainstreaming sustainability in all European policies, and also with several initiatives which was announced at that time, and also new ones came out. But for the land sector, I would say that counterfog strategy, all the policies and new ambitions on the climate, circular economy, action plan, zero ambition pollution and toxic free environment, all these are initiatives that are linked and somehow involve the agricultural sector. One of the very first important initiatives and deliverable of the Green Deal work, the work within the Green Deal, was the agreement of a new climate law, where basically the European citizens, ourselves, we committed to reach neutrality, climate neutrality in 2050, and also for the whole economic sector in Europe. And also we also increased the ambitions in terms of reduction of emissions by 2030 to 55%. This in order to reach the neutrality in a more gradual way. And we see in the law that there is also stronger provision on adaptation to climate change. So it is really well recognized that how important it is to have, in the same moment, adaptation to climate, to have a resilient land use sector in order to try to reach this more ambitious target. And then the Commission had a look at all legislation in places, which in a way or another were connected with these new climate ambitions, and then to see if they were good already for this, or if they needed some changes, or if we also needed some new initiatives. This is why in July last year, the Commission proposed this package, which was called the Fit for 55 package. 55, of course, is linked to this new reduction target of minus 55%, where basically delivered a set of integrated policies for all the sectors, sometimes proposing new targets, sometimes increasing targets, sometimes increasing sustainability criteria, sometimes also proposing new initiatives. And the ones which are more closely linked with the land sector, agriculture, is the European Forest Strategy, the proposal for the modification of the LULUCF, the land use change and forestry, the effort sharing regulation. It is because there we have the emissions from the agriculture, methane and N2O, and also renewable energy directive. Of course, this has been backed by an impact assessment that already started with discussion a few years ago when the Commission published the A Clean Planet for All. So the different pathway we could follow in Europe to reach the neutrality in 2050. And the result of the impact assessment was that this minus 55% can be achieved in a responsible way in Europe, that there is indeed the potentiality to decouple the economic growth from the use of resources, and then all sectors should contribute. You see here the different contribution expected from the oil sector in order to go to the neutrality in 2050. Of course, we have the energy sector, particularly in the beginning, but then also the agriculture and the land use sector in general needs to contribute, do its effort to reduce emissions. And but also, if you look at 2050, we will still have residual emissions in Europe. These emissions are from some industrial sector, but there are mainly emissions from agriculture, because emissions from agriculture can never go to zero. So there, to have neutrality, we also need to work these years to increase the sink in Europe in order to balance these emissions in 2050. And at the level that has been estimated by the models used by the Commission are around minus 500 million tons of CO2 equivalent in 2050, and now we are around 262. So we really need to do a big effort there to almost double the sequestration, the removals in the European land sector. This, I think you know very well, emissions from agriculture are basically mainly methane and N2O. We are observing a stabilization in the last year, and it represents at European level around 10%, 9% of the European emissions, the emissions from agriculture, and they mainly are emissions of methane mainly from enteric fermentation. This is also why the Commission's published a European strategy to reduce methane emission. It is basically not only for agriculture, but also for energy, waste sector, with a set of proposals in terms of actions for these years, also some legislative initiative to help reducing methane emissions also from the agricultural sector. And there is, of course, a set of sectorial actions for the agriculture to reduce methane emissions to somehow wants to balance technology, market, dietary changes, and in order to still anyway ensure that there is a sustainable business livelihood for farmers and business opportunity. We set an expert group in the Commission to specifically work on the metrics to improve the inventories of methane emissions in the agriculture, because we see there is a lot of work to do still there. To prepare a set of best practices, we already did 2 workshops involving different scientists from Europe on which are the main measures and the action technology that we can use to reduce emissions from methane from agriculture. And we are working. We worked also already on a tool for farmers to assess their own greenhouse gases balance, including CO2, because we think that that this is a very important tool for farmers also to increase the uptake of them for the technology and the measures that are needed. And I will talk also a lot on carbon farming, how this is connected. And of course, we have a set of targeted research specifically for this. And a lot of action, which also on the international dimensions, because methane emissions are not occurring in EU, but outside EU. When we go to the side of the removers, and then basically here I'll tell you what is which are the main elements of proposed by the Commission in modifying the land use change and forestry regulation. On one hand, we are proposing to have a simple way, a more transparent and effective compliance rule and targets. So basically, for the first time, the Commission is proposing to set a specific target to 2030 on the removals that we need to have in Europe. And this target is proposed to be minus 310 million tons of CO2 equivalent by 2030. It's basically an increase of 15% compared to the current level. And then in additionally, it's also proposing that the land sector, basically combining emissions of methane and N2O from agriculture with the removals from the land sector, be neutral by 2035. And then this is something that is also there with, of course, the combination of these different sources of emissions and the removals. And then here you have the contribution that can come from forestry, from agriculture, from the way we are using our peatlands and settlement, of course. And here there is also a big challenge on how we have to protect the current sink that we have. Because in the last year it has been increasing substantially because of different reasons, natural reasons, and also because of the use of the biomass that we are having from woody material, for example. But there we also need to work on how to protect the current sink, which is quite very fragile and volatile storage of carbon that we have in Europe. The climate neutrality of the land sector can be reached by different combinations of action within the LULUCF and the non-agriculture mitigation, non-CO2 mitigation practices. It also, this combination of practice will depend on what will be the carbon price in Europe. It's very much also driven by this. For increasing removals, this is a little bit of a list of measures that the Commission considered. We don't see them as exhaustive, but just because they were also the one that we could also model in the model that we are using. So we talked about rewetting drainage peatlands or doing paludiculture, for example, afforestation, reforestation, better management of soil with reducing tillage, agroforestry, and also the sequestration of the storing of carbon in products. And also when you go to the reduction of emissions of methane and N2O, we modeled precision farming, efficient fertilizer use, anaerobic digestion, feed additives, and breedings. These are mostly technological solutions. Of course, there is also the link with the dietary changes, which has been also modeled somehow. It also can have a quite big impact on the reduction of emissions. But then how can we bring better incentives to farmers and land managers to increase the removals in Europe? There is no a specific tool for this now. So this is why we published the communication on a sustainable carbon cycle in December last year, where basically still we have to remember that the first priority in Europe is to drastically reduce the use of fossil carbon. But then we saw how important it is to increase the removals to reach the neutrality. And then we can do this through different way. We can also store removals CO2 in geological reservoir with industrial solutions, but there's still a little bit of work to do there. We can store carbon in bio-based material and also in soil in biomass with natural-based solutions. And the idea is to try to set to systems that are rewarding farmers directly for their efforts on the increasing of carbon removals. And then it can also become a business opportunity for farmers that can potentially sell credits to the market. And also we see that the development of new value chains on bio-based products also will give farmers the opportunity to differentiate their income, without considering the fact that together with this, there are several co-benefits also linked with biodiversity and also with increased resilience to climate change. As you know, soil organic carbon is very important to increase the resilience against drought, for example. So that's the work we are doing. We identifying the communication of several barriers. There are financial barriers for farmers. They have to switch to a new management system. There are already a lot of, I would say, voluntary market with the schemes to certify carbon. They use different way to do it. Transparency is not always there. You cannot always compare the way these standards are assessing credits of carbon. So this also actually in a way decrease the trust both for farmers and also for buyers, potential buyers of credit. Then there is also the fact that we need to ensure the environmental integrity, the additionality and the permanence of carbon. And we recognize that there is a big work to do in the monitoring, reporting and verification of carbon. That's really, really, really difficult. We all know the different challenges there, and then we need to set action to improve on this. And also the fact that farmers really needs to have a tailored advisory service. We cannot be a top-down approach this. It needs to be really tailored to the specific situation and condition. There are some action we are planning. Just two of them which are important. An expert group that we will launch soon. So I invite you to follow the communication channels of DigiClima. I think in 1 or 2 weeks there will be a launch of a call for an expert group. Probably yesterday my colleagues Annette said you about the role of the soil missions, living labs, and we are also mainstreaming carbon farming in the current policies. For example, now in the discussion we are having with member states for the approval of their strategic plan, we are recommending them, advising them to push efforts to support farmers for carbon sequestration. And yes, these are the main things. And I think the very important step for this year is the preparation of the regulatory framework for the certification of carbon removals. Here, basically, we will try to answer to those barriers identified before, where we want to set, we want to propose a European system to certify credits, not only for the for not the one based on nature-based solutions, but also the ones with the industry for bio-based product. We had some activities already. There was an open public consultation open until the 2nd May. Basically, we will work on different quality criteria. So how to quantify, how to define the additionality, how to ensure long-term sequestration, how to ensure the environmental integrity, and all the transparency issues which are linked with the certification of carbons. And also the governance which are there. I mean, it might be more a European centralized governance or more member state level. So these are all options that, and do we need the methodologies, principles which are good for all carbon credits or specific methodologies for the different typology of carbon credits? These are all options that are there. We are analyzing them in the impact assessment, and so far still foreseen as planned the proposal published for the end of this year. Just a few words on the Renewable Energy Directive, because I think it's also very importantly linked with in the way we use the land sector, for example, to produce industrial crops and biomass crops. We have an increased, proposed an increased target to 40%, and also increased sustainability criteria. For example, in the revision, we are proposing there is no sourcing from primary and highly biodiverse forest, peatland, and wetland, and minimizing the large clear cut, together with other two different, more technical, and of course the go for a cascading use of biomass. So basically, use the biomass first for production of product which stores carbon for a longer time with a higher value, and then at the end of the chain, to use it for production of bioenergy. And of course, we also have the European forest strategy, where we set principles and activities for the next years on forestry. An important one will be the preparation of a European monitoring system of forestry that started, and there is a call for evidence there, where you can also reply to questions and propose your position papers on this. But there, of course, the attention is always to afforestation, preservation, restoration, increased biodiversity, because also was very much linked to the biodiversity strategy. And all this, we also have the sustainability requirement in how farmer has to manage his land, that comes from the farm to fork strategy. You know, the proposed target on reduce the use of pesticide, on excess of nutrients, antimicrobial resistance, and the organic farming. That is, for example, this last go to 25% of total farmland under organic farming by 2030. These are basically setting a kind of a baseline for sustainable management of the land, which sometimes can be also contrasting and having trade-off with other objectives. So there is really together, for example, with the one coming from the biodiversity strategy as well. So these are all things that are somehow increasing the attention on land managers and keeping them, placing them in a very important place. There is where also we need to give them tools to try to deliver on all these aspects in also considering a sustainable, that sustainability is also having the income dimension. For that, the common agricultural policy can be already an help. It remains the main policy tool in when it goes to land management, particularly for the agricultural sector. The objectives are all there. I mean, for ensuring the 3 dimensions of the sustainability. Also, you see a specific one on mitigation and adaptation, on renewable energy, on the use of resources. There is a ring fencing of budget that needs to go for this objective, both in the direct payment and in the rural development plan. there are specific result indicators which are measuring this aspect, and so there is now really the opportunity for member states to prepare a strategic plan which really goes there. The main instruments intervention on the CAP, briefly, you can already see an increased ambition in an environment already in a good agricultural environmental obligations from farmers, which are mainly on the protecting of soil and the carbon in soil. But then there are the eco schemes, which are hectare-based payment. It's a new tool, voluntary for member states, but sorry, for farmers. But they are compulsory for member states to be defined with additional incentives for them to support practices in land management, which goes in the direction of climate mitigation and adaptation. You again will have rural development measures, but the very important tool, I would say, particularly in the agricultural sector, where we need to build a lot of pilot projects in different places to reflect which are the local conditions, are this innovation cooperation for innovation tool, where farmers can build projects together with the researchers and solution providers and be supported for that. And a lot of horizontal support which are very important for creating an enabling environment, are basically the support for knowledge exchange, for the cooperation, and things, for example, when we are at carbon farming, they need to make soil sampling. They are costly. For carbon in the soil, you really need a lot of soil sampling. And this can, of course, be supported by the common agricultural policy. Somehow it helps to reduce the cost for farmers to enter in schemes, in carbon farming schemes. This is a kind of a summary slides where you can see the role of the CAP on which are linked with the climatic objectives, and an advertisement for you. I think also Annette told yesterday about this open call, which closes on 27th September, of support action, coordination support action project, and which are linked with more with carbon farming, and also research project for monitoring, reporting, and verification of soil carbon. So it's an invitation for you to create good partnerships and propose, because there it's really need to work to improve the quality of the current situation, the current knowledge. This is, I think, the last slides. It's kind of what, from my point of view, how would I like this? Being a researcher for a time, which are still the open challenges in these sectors? I think from the research and innovation, we need to have implementable, economic, reasonable, technical solutions for the reduction of emissions of methane and N2O in the agricultural sector. We already have a lot there, but the uptake from farmers is still very low. So we need to understand why it is this, and try to solve these barriers. I mean, agricultural emissions can never go to zero, but anyway, this cannot be an argument to be used to avoid that agricultural agriculture also does its own effort to reduce emissions. We need tools for monitoring, reporting, and verification. As I said, there's also a way to how we can combine all different technology, remote sensing, already existing databases, for example, within the common agricultural policies, the way we use the land to really have at parcel level a monitoring system of carbon and emissions. There, I really see that we need a lot of work there. Also for simply integrating and homogenizing all the data that we have at European level from different typology of sources. Tool for farmers, very friendly for them, are also very important, in my opinion, because they give them the dimension to understand what they are doing, where is the impact, do eco-design with these tools. And last year, we concluded a study in the Agri where we combined a module of greenhouse gases emission in the farm sustainability tool for nutrient. I don't know if you are aware of what it is. It's a tool that that will be released to the farmers from member states within the common agricultural policy. It's mainly for nutrient management, sustainable nutrient management at farm level. We did last year a project to include a module on greenhouse gases as well. But then, of course, there are several tools in Europe that can be used. Commercial one, which for sure would be better than this, because this is just set basic algorithms and principles. By the way, it's available, so you can also use it and develop it. So we really think that this is very important. And also we have a big challenge with the peatland management in Europe, where we are farming there. So we need to find a way to still maintaining the business of farmers by reducing emissions from the mineralization of carbon. And also linked with what Lilian was saying, to work in a long vision in preparing planning tools on the way we use the land for basically fulfilling all this function that we are asking to the land, which sometimes seems they are contrasting. Like we have to produce biomass, more biomass for supporting the bioeconomy, but at the same time we also have to store carbon. So how do we find a good compromise there? And that's, of course, we have the policy that can help in this, in incentivizing, but probably public incentives is not enough. We also need to integrate this with private money and try to exploit all the synergies that are there. Yeah, that was my last slide, and these are some interesting links for you where more in details you have what I said so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola, for this very elaborate and interesting talk. I wondered whether somebody also wants to have or has a question for Nicola. I can allow one question, and I think, sorry, the lady was first. So, and
otherwise the online participants cannot hear.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Nicolas. It was a very interesting talk. My name is Tessa, this is my colleague Sven, and we're actually working on tools for carbon farming. I was really curious about the initiative that you mentioned about creating protocols at the level of the European Union. We've been working with organizations such as Vera, who have created their very own elaborate protocols, as you mentioned. And I was just wondering if you could elaborate a bit on that initiative. Are those credits going to the ETS system or something else? Maybe you can add a bit. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Not much to say in the sense that the work is still ongoing, but also if you have a look at one of these web pages, the first link on top right, the top left, you see the general description of the initiative. It's we are analyzing what is there already, where including, and try to take the best from all of them and to set a European system. It's for certifying credits which are produced in Europe and not outside Europe. And it is for, and we are not going to tell, to define in this work how credits are used, how this can be used. So it will be, from the time being, only a system to recognize the credits, and also everything which is behind it. I mean, the additionality issue, the permanence for carbon with natural-based solutions is particularly problematic. This, and also the other typical things that you need to have in a certification, like the governance, the transparency, that one. Remember that this is not only for removals with the natural-based solutions, but it's also for removals with the industrial solutions, carbon capture and storage, or removals with the bio-based product, I would say. So it will be a framework regulation which sets very general principles. We are still assessing it, but probably the best option will be that next years we will, together with the expert group, which will have a fundamental role there, and which will remain in place for 3-4 years for the duration, for helping the Commission in defining methodologies, specifically for the different typology of carbon removal, because it's quite easy to imagine that we cannot have the same principles for storage in mineral reservoirs and in a bio-based product, for example. So it's these are the things I can say now, and we are still assessing the options, and what would be the preferred one is still not yet.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. I'd like also to invite Lilian back in the front. And well, we had some very interesting talks, and we see that a lot is going on. If you see, only yesterday we already heard something about the European agenda, and here you also sketched all the developments taking place at this moment as part of the European Green Deal. So a lot of opportunities also for scientists, of course, but also a lot of opportunities for policymakers, and a lot of well, knowledge to be developed and worked out in frameworks. So having seen the discussions, Lilian, on water safety in the Netherlands and everything around it concerned by reacting and being ahead of climate change and being prepared for the future. Also, the European Commission has set some long-term goals. Well, if you have listened to one another, Nicola, can you say what you would like to take home from the presentation Lilian gave you, and what maybe can be some lessons learned which you would like to also apply for the European community?
Thanks. Well, I think that the long-term vision and planning that now is embracing, and also the institutionalization of somehow of the body that in a way has the power to deal with the problem are two important things. In the Commission, I see that the work on the long term, it is of course on targets. We can discuss if 2050 it's long term or not, but it's somehow a target. But there is a little bit, it's more challenging to define the way, to have a long-term vision for reaching, to define the way to reach this target. We need indeed, of course, we have the help of scientists which are inside the Commission, but also outside with the lesson that we learn from research project that the Commission is financing. We need to institutionalize, I would say, a way to take the results from the science to the policymaker. And in doing this, we need a translator, I would say, somebody that is translating the results of it for policymakers. GRC is doing a good job on that with the Knowledge Hub, for example. But this is something that but they are still not for all the sectors. So on adaptation, I think we really need, on climate, we really need one. And adaptation and climate mitigation, they are very much linked in the land sector. So also this, I recognize from the data that the link that you are making them, recognizing there, it's also embraced by the Commission, and it is recognized. We also have a new adaptation strategy published last year, which is for all the sector, not only for agriculture. And for agriculture, we are pushing a lot the use of natural-based solutions there, because we see the synergies with mitigation, biodiversity, and other environmental aspects.
Okay, thank you. Lilian, I also want to ask you a question, because in your talk you also mentioned that, okay, we're having a national Delta program and we set our goals, but you also mentioned that climate change doesn't listen to borders, that we also had those water bombs concerning a lot of countries in Europe. What do you need with the Delta program from the European arena? How can you support one another? What would you wish that Brussels would help you with?
Thank you very much. And Nicola, I was very impressed by all the work that and the very ambitious goal that you are setting for agriculture and biodiversity. And I think this is not only for the Delta program, but for the whole of the Netherlands at the moment, a very important stimulus to try and make our agriculture sustainable. I think crossing borders means that you have to take the whole system into account. So for us, that is the whole water system, the main rivers, but also the tributary small rivers and brooks, and the different types of soil that they are traveling through. And I think there are meetings on the European level. We have meetings with our German counterparts and with our Belgian counterparts, but I think if you can take a systems approach on the European level, which is then translated to national levels and then translated to regional and local levels, like nested eggs, I think they are of Matrushka dolls, they are called, so that you on a global level and we on the regional and local level. I think if we can set, if Europeans can set standards for well, what we are trying to achieve with sustainable agriculture and the role of water in the soil system, I think that's also very important. That would help a lot, and then we can try and feed that process bottom up from what we are learning in the Netherlands, because our Delta program on fresh water has already a lot of measures with regard to agriculture and safeguarding peatlands or restoring peatlands. That's also very necessary in the Netherlands. And there's one thing I would like to mention to Nicola. What we did find out that working with scenarios that can be visualized, so use images. I see Tim van Hattem in the zaal, who made a very beautiful scenario for 2120, correct? But next to the content, the visuals, the images that you can project and see are very important in order to start discussions and meetings also on the European level. And I think the OECD has a bit of experience with that. But well, maybe not in public, but if you ever need somebody in an expert group on this, we can help you. I would love that, by the way.
Thank you, Lilia. Well, what I also noticed within both your talks was a special role for land and land management, actually, to achieve the adaptation and mitigation goals. And as this is also a conference, of course, in which the nature and the system play the key role, I'd also like to ask you here with us to join in Mentimeter. We have some time for it, don't we? Because the speakers kept to their time, so we can have this discussion with all of you.
I wasn't prepared.
And well, we wanted to know from you, hearing these talks, well, how can we...
Does everybody know how it works?
Yes, okay, because otherwise we have to explain. You've got to go to menti.com and use a code, which is on the screen. Yeah, and then you start typing your ideas. Nature-based solutions, sorry. NBS is nature-based solutions. Yeah, I wonder what you come up with. Long-term funding, knowledge. You I think that everybody listened very carefully because I see a lot of reactions of statements which you have all put forward. So can you read them on the screen there, Nicola? Yes. Ah, okay, yeah. Politicians with a spine. Dylan Ferreira, he was a speaker yesterday. Would someone like to react on what who's been writing politicians with a spine? You did. Okay. Will you explain why you especially need that?
I think the current situation in the Netherlands with nitrogen kind of shows that if there's pressure from a group, there's a flopping movement by politicians to do or not do something, especially linked to what you were mentioning in the second presentation. If on a European level we want to go in a direction, and then on a local level politicians can decide, no, we might not do it because it's not convenient for us right now. I find that's quite a pity, but yeah.
Thank you. I also saw somebody who wrote citizen who have an urban. Like can you scroll it back or? It starts scrolling again. You did?
No, I didn't. I wrote something else. But I see a lot of long-term financing and stable governance and other long-term investment and financing. I'm from Australia, and we have had carbon farming policies for about 12 years. And the main reason why agricultural participation is very low is the lack of that stable governance and the fear of every 3 years is our cycle. There's going to be a different government. There's going to be different regulations, which it has been every 3 years. It changed names and different methodologies were approved. So I just want to focus on that one, the stable governmental structure. I don't know who wrote that, but that is so important. So come up with a 10, 20-year plan rather than a cycle plan.
Thank you. And I already saw it pass, the citizen participation and local solutions. I would like some more information about that.
This is mostly related to nature-based solutions specifically, but often local solutions from citizens create more engagement, and they provide very concretely very little for example, carbon storage and such, but by engaging citizens more and providing a use of space, often in urban spaces where you cannot provide big solutions, you can still create a kind of, how do you call that? A lappendeken. So like a very large network of small solutions, which in the end do have a big impact.
Nicola, would you like to react on the long term?
No, yes, that's it's fundamental, particularly in the land sector, because sometimes even results of the implementation of practice are not easy to detect the year after or to turn in things. For example, if you talk about afforestation, you start seeing things for carbon after 10 years maybe, and so really this long-term vision and the continuation of tools for supporting the implementation of practices, particularly in the land sector, is important. With the CAP, there's possibility of multi-year commitments, which goes to 5 years, but still 5 years is not enough for nature-based solutions. This is why, for example, we see a synergy with private money, let's say, where the common agriculture policy, for example, can help in the startup phase or in the implementing solutions, and then to carbon farming with private money, you can try to ensure longer-term continuation of good practices.
Thank you. And Lilian, I'd also like to ask you something. I also saw here that communication, you also mentioned it, but also, well, responsibility by the farmers or other landowners is very important. How can you react on that? What do you think about those? What can we do?
Thank you. Yeah. Well, what we try to do at the Delta program is providing information and measures and possible solution also on the level of the individual citizen. I think especially in the Delta program on spatial adaptation, we have things like the national challenge on tegelwippen, getting rid of hard surfaces in tiles, getting rid of the tiles in your garden, green roofs. There we have a lot of municipalities that provide subsidies for these small steps that can have a very meaningful results. And I think that by combining these things, you give room to individual citizens to contribute, but it's also very important that you try to take it to the next level and show what the results are on a regional level and what they are contributing. I think it's a dialogue between, you have to, well, what we call dance between the skills. It's a global problem that you can address on the local level, but on the local level, you can contribute to the regional and national level. And I think that's why we are so happy that the Delta Commissioner is a national commissioner, not dependent only on the national change of policies every 4 years, but we have a continuity in both funding and planning. And I think that's very important to connect all these skills and to address what you can do on the individual level, but also, and that's a new challenge, to look at the total of efforts on the regional level and what is missing still. Is that answer to your question?
Yeah, thank you. Very nice. And also it reminds me of the fact that actually we need climate heroes, of course, and also good examples like ambassadors. And what I actually really liked last week was that soccer club Feyenoord, the Rotterdam soccer club. They said they are going to change the lawn on their of their stadium. And pieces of lawn were rewarded for people who were taking out some tiles of their garden, and they could win some of this holy grass in their own streets. So But well, these are incentives with which you can communicate. So I hope we'll have much more of those examples actually to share. And Nicola and Lilian, I was really happy to have you here. Thank you very, very much. I think there are still quite some questions for you and also willingness to discuss with you some further. So I hope you'll join us at the coffee break and maybe also for lunch. Please also address them with your questions, and I like a big hand for them both. These are organically grown bulbs.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's the same as yesterday. We've organically grown bulbs from the Netherlands, covered in white powder, which is not the powder you think from the Netherlands, but it's a special algae-based powder which protects the bulbs against fungicides. So,
Thank you very much.
yeah, and I also have another small